Hello, I'm Tarmo Tuisk from Tallinn University of Technology, and I'm going to speak today about the role of culture in conflict management and negotiations. This presentation has been prepared within a program that has been organized by 4 universities: Turiba University from Latvia, Vilnius University from Lithuania, University of Genoa from Italy, and Tallinn University of Technology from Estonia. Agenda. What we are going to talk today about understanding cultural differences, about fast and slow messages, and about high and low context cultures, and also about space and time in intercultural communication, and about monochronic people and polychronic people. We have to give some overview about culture. What is culture within current presentation and overall? Even though culture is perceived personally, it's still a shared system. As culture is experienced personally, very few individuals see or what it is, but it is, we have to acknowledge, a program of behavior. Members of a common culture not only share information, but also methods of coding, storing, and retrieving of that information. And these methods vary from culture to culture. Let's speak about cultural differences. Are these hidden? Knowing what kind of information people from other cultures require is one key to effective international communication. What are hidden codes? These exist in the behavior of persons. Usually we need a person that's called code breaker to understand these kind of hidden codes existing in cultures. It's unbelievable, but 90% or more of all communication is usually culture's nonverbal messages. This means this is not a language we speak. There are other things like signs, movements, and so on. Culture itself is a communication way. Is it so? Each cultural world operates according to its own internal dynamic, principles and laws. This can be written or not written, and there is also time and space conception to understand the culture. But what is common for each culture? These are words, material things, and behavior. Words, these are medium of business, politics, diplomacy, negotiations, and so on and so on. Material things, these are usually indicators of status and power. What about behavior? This is a feedback about people, how they feel, and this includes techniques to avoid confrontation, to avoid conflict. We can speak about culture and some aspects in it as of silent language. This means that human behavior exists also outside conscious awareness. It includes evolutionary concepts, practices, solutions to problems, shared experience of ordinary people. And it provides insights into the underlying principles that shape our lives. These principles are not merely interesting, but eminently practical. What I want to say here, that these principles are exactly subject of this topic I'm speaking today. It's not only interesting about know this, but it's the only way, by learning about them, how we manage in different situations when we meet different cultures. Let's speak about fast and slow messages. Cross-cultural communications has more to do with releasing right responses than sending right messages. This means that just to be sure that we have sent our text correctly or we have spoken our message correctly is not enough. We have to wait to write responses. This will be the best acknowledgement about people understanding our messages. And this information to people can be sent in different speeds. A fast message to them who have used to have it in a slow format will miss the target. I will make some examples pretty soon. Although people can understand the content of wrong speed message, for them who expect it in different speed, it won't be understandable. Also, people are not always aware that information can be sent in different speeds. Here are some examples of fast and slow messages. Fast messages and slow messages. Prose as fast message corresponds to poetry as slow message. The same way we can see headlines corresponding to books, a communiqué corresponding to an ambassador, propaganda corresponding to art, cartoons and etchings, TV commercials and TV documentary, television versus print, easy familiarity versus deep relationships, and manners versus culture. Let's think about these and let's elaborate a bit. What is the meaning of this categorization? Almost everything in life can be placed somewhere within this fast, slow message spectrum. What is the slow messages? overall, this is research, diplomacy, writing books, and creating art. Messages of Buddha, Confucius, Goethe, Rembrandt are still now, hundreds of years after the fact, under deciphering by human beings, which are very slow messages, are person as such, a language and culture, at the same time incorporating multiple styles of languages, where messages are released for them who are willing to spend some time to understand it. Let's change the topic a bit and let's have a look at culture from a different angle when we speak about high and low context. What is context? Context is the information that surrounds the event, elements that combine to produce a given meaning. Events and context are in different proportions depending on the culture. High context, communication or message, is the one where most of the information is already on the person and very little is on the coded, explicit transmitted part of the message. For example, twins communicating with each other. These two people, twins, they know each other from earliest childhood. They have been brought up in the same way, usually, and they know their signs, they know their family history, they know something about their common places where they have been, and to give a reference to something doesn't need much, because the context already exists, and this is what we call high context. What is low context? This is the situation where the mass of information is vested in explicit code. For example, two lawyers in the courtroom during a trial. Even in a situation when these two lawyers know each other, they eliminate everything personal at this moment, and they just follow the law code that is necessary for the job, for this trial. I will make some more examples pretty soon. High context people and low context people. How we can separate them or how we can distinguish them across cultures. High context people, these are Japanese, Arabs, Mediterranean. These people have extensive information networks among family, friends, colleagues and clients. Because of daily information exchange, their messages are high context. Low context people, these are Americans, Swiss, Germans, Scandinavians and also other Northern Europeans. For example, French are much higher on the context scale than Germans or Americans. So there is a very much variation within one continent. It's evident. Let's say French and Germans. What about space? This is about territoriality. What is mine for Germans is not perceived the same way for Americans. For example, touching a car. This has different meanings. Invading one's German personal space versus American's personal space. Space communicates power. For example, location of the boss in the office. Let's think about this. I think we all have met the situation when the boss is sitting behind a big table on the high chair and all people who come there have to feel some kind of distance. What is personal space? It's a bubble around the person. Example here, North versus South. People in South, generally in, let's say, Southern Europe or let's say high context cultures, they like to communicate with each other. They want to have some kind of closeness. They want to have some kind of information from the context, from the situation. And this is why these persons like to maybe touch each other, be near to each other. While in North, people want to keep distance. They stress more on individualism, freedoms, and so on. And usually these reactions to this kind of situations are unconscious. We don't know exactly why we react this way. Here is an example. It has been done some tests to show what is the bubble around the person. I think we all understand this. Here also, people coming from different cultures, they feel that there is a person sitting on a chair, although there is pretty many empty spaces, is kind of a reference point to them. They want to be close to them. While another person from other culture will not perceive this in the same way. Let's speak about time. We'll focus now on monochronic and polychronic time. Monochronic, paying attention and doing only one thing at a time. Time is experienced and used by a linear way, perceived as tangible. It can be spent, wasted, saved, and lost. Polychronic time, simultaneous occurrence of many things by a great involvement of people. More emphasis on completing human actions than meeting the schedules. Here are some examples how people of monochronic time and people of polychronic time, how do they differ? Monochronic people like to do one thing at a time, while polychronic people do many things at once. Monochronic people concentrate on the job, polychronic people are highly distractible and subject to interruptions. Also, in general, we can see that low context people are mostly monochronic and high context mostly polychronic. So there is some kind of are concerned not about disturbing others. They follow rules of privacy and consideration, while polychronic people are concerned with those who are closely related, family, friends, close business associates, more than privacy. Also, monochronic people show great respect for private property. They seldom borrow or lend, while polychronic people borrow and lend things often and very easily. While polychronic people base their promptness on relationship. They value people. This is the way they act. This is the way they would like to invest their time in relationships, in people, a relation between time and space. In monochronic time culture, emphasis is on the compartmentalization of functions and people. For example, private offices are soundproof. In polychronic time culture, business offices with large reception areas, people in polychronic culture feel that private space disrupts the flow of information. Appointments mean very little and may be shifted around at the last minute in the sake of someone who is more important in individual's hierarchy of family, friends or associates. Here again we see the time and space, their actions, their job environment, everything is used more or less to keep their family and friends' relations in order, and thereafter some other obligations come. But to be honest, it's not always so polarized. So this is, I would like to warn, monochronic and polychronic time culture, this dichotomy cannot be overemphasized in all situations we meet. Time is also communication. For example, Americans complain, Germans take forever to reach decisions. This means that the procedures about finding an agreement are perceived by Americans very slow when Germans are their business associates or business partners. There is a need to be contexted in a local time system, and the best example about this is scheduling and the lead time. In US and Germany, the schedules are sacred. Short lead time means the business is less important. For example, 2 weeks minimum. When we have more important meetings in USA or Germany, so we make this like month, we book time, a month or even 2, and this has already meaning that this important we are going to have with a partner will be very important. If we agree, for example, a meeting next day, it's obvious that this is less important. The importance of proper timing is also very variable across cultures. Usually announcements of major changes must be carefully timed. Anything that occurs outside business hours refers to emergency. This is in USA and Northern Europe. People are not ready to do some business after hours. This is usually devoted to family or other personal things. Also, we have to know that, for example, in August in France, everything shuts down for vacancies. There is no point to have a business meeting in August in France. What is common in US is short lunch versus longer dinner in France to get acquainted with the business partners. We should not expect that if we have been invited to a short lunch in the United States, that this is kind of negative attitude about this business or something. While just French people want to make friends with their business partners and to invest to their relationship, which will be longer. Appointments. Long waiting time in the US and Germany, this usually means a deliberate put down or a message about the individual being very disorganized. While in France, no such message is intended. We know from previews that usually a Frenchman has invested some time to talking to his mother or taking care of family, and this is why it happens. But we have to know that interactions between monochronic and polychronic people can be stressful unless both parties know and decode the meanings behind each other's language and time. So we have always to keep in mind these kind of differences across the cultures. What are action chains? The importance of completion. Monochronic low-context cultures, compartmentalized approach, and dependence on schedules are more sensitive to interruptions and more vulnerable to the breaking of action chains compared to high-context cultures. High-context people are more elastic because of extensive and cohesive networks in their system. What about these action chains and disputes? All cultures have input safeguards to prevent a dispute from escalating. These safeguards apply only within the context of one's own culture. In foreign situation, where a dispute appears imminent, it is essential to do two things. Proceed slowly, taking every action possible to maintain a course. Second, seek the advice of skillful, tactful interpreter of the culture, a mediator. And now we make some conclusions what I have spoken today. In summary, we spoke about understanding high context and low context cultures and their differences. We spoke about monochronic and polychronic time cultures. We spoke about speed of messages, about contexts, about space and time, and about action change. All these are essential to understand in situations of conflict management and during negotiations. In each cultural context, all acts, all events, and all material things have meaning. Here is some literature you can elaborate later by yourself to learn more about the current subject. But I would like to thank you. Goodbye.